right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2021. This is for day 14, and I'm actually recording this a little bit early. It's only 6:30 p.m. on day 13, but I need to do something very much outside of my character. I don't tend to do this much because I find it kind of crass. But anyone that watched my vlog yesterday knows I am not doing well right now, so I need just a tiny little endorphin hit. And for me, this did it for me. If you remember a while back, I actually lost a subscriber over this because I talked about drama. I talked about ThinkDM banning Silvery Barbs because it breaks the game. And I mentioned, it's really not that big a deal. I do think it should be a second level spell instead of a first one. That's the only problem I've got with it. And it's a super simple fix. It actually brings it in line with all the other Strixhaven spells, to the point where when I actually read the Strixhaven book and I saw literally every other new spell was second level and it was first, I almost thought it was a typo. Apparently not, because the errata came out today. Whew. And I will 100% admit, I went on a little gloating spree. There was these long Twitter threads that I had with ThinkDM and another person. I can't remember their name because it was long. The reason I remember ThinkDM's name is because it's two words effectively, so it was super easy for me to remember. And then a third person. They all chimed in. No, you're wrong. This breaks the game because it ruins legendary resistance. Now again, when I make up voices for people, I don't believe that's how they actually talk. This is the argument I'm talking about, is the idea, not the person. As I mentioned before, I have the utmost respect for the ThinkDM. They put out a lot of really great quality content on their blog or on their website. To be 100% honest, I'm actually not sure what you call a text-based website anymore. They used to be called blogs. That name has kind of a negative connotation now because it was used by journalists and more professional writers to go, oh, you have a blog. Well, I write for the New York Times. I don't have a blog. I have a featured article in the New York Times, or I have a weekly column in the New York Times. Despite the fact that it's basically the same thing. A weekly blog and a weekly column in the New York Times is effectively the same thing, just one of them has a massive gatekeeper, and the other one anyone can do. So whatever ThinkDM's, whatever they call their website, it's a very nice website. They write really great quality content. They were just flat out wrong about this. So was everyone else that argued with it. And I do make a distinction here because I'm going to read you the exact quote unquote errata, because the argument I anticipate coming up is, oh, no, we were right. That's why they had to errata and change it in order to make it not affect legendary resistance. So see, we made them errata. And I'm like, nope. This is what it specifically says. This is the only reference to Silvery Barb in the new errata. By the way, there's a new errata that came out. And I believe there's only actual one change, which is in reference to the Drow, which I may talk about in a later Daily December, just because the ideas influencing it are causing some issues among certain people, and it is an interesting idea. But right now I only care about this. So here's the reference in the errata. Can the Silvery Barbs spell in Strixhaven affect legendary resistance? No. Period. It goes on. When a creature uses legendary resistance, the creature turns a failed saving throw into a success, regardless of the number rolled on the d20. Forcing that creature to re-roll the d20 afterwards doesn't change the fact that the save succeeded as a result of legendary resistance. No amount of re-rolling will undo that success. That's what I said. Now, some people are going to try and focus on, well, you said that it's impossible to do it because you can't make them re-roll a roll that already happened. And to a point, that's a valid criticism of one of my arguments. I made a couple. And one of my arguments was, no, it's a completely different thing. Legendary resistance doesn't matter about the roll. And I said that multiple times. I even mentioned in the Twitter thread, I said, Crawford has already ruled on this. Legendary resistance, it doesn't matter how you failed the save. Legendary resistance makes it a success no matter what. So I did make the exact argument that they made here. From the fact that they say forcing that creature to reroll the d20 afterwards doesn't change the fact that the save succeeded as a result of the legendary resistance, does kind of imply that you theoretically could make them reroll the save, which I personally disagree. But if that's their interpretation, that's their interpretation. But the idea that the legendary resistance is separate from the roll is right there. So I was right. And this is not an errata in that they changed anything with the spell. They did not change a single word of the spell, so it never applied. The interpretation that all these other people claimed was true and was blatantly obvious, and we've got to ban the spell because it's turning the frogs into beholders, wasn't a thing. Wasn't a thing. They made this huge mountain out of a molehill. It was exactly how I described it. It was a min-maxer argument. Most min-maxer arguments are bad readings of rules that require you to intentionally misinterpret wording. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have had with min-maxers. They go, oh, no, I can do this. I said, no, you can't. Yes, it is. According to this rule. I go, what's the rule say? Well, the rule says, and they'll read out like 2 words. They'll say, see, that means, I said, no, it says this, and I will read the entire rule. And it is referenced over here in this book, and I will read them another rule. And it is referenced in Sage Advice here, and I will tell them the ruling from Crawford or Perkins or whomever wrote that particular column. So, no, this has never been. This wasn't a change that was made. This has never been that way. You were wrong. I'm sorry if you built your character around being wrong. The nice thing about most aspects of 5th edition D&D is there's a lot of room to fix mistakes, especially once you start dealing with Titashas and all the optional rules they introduce that allow you to, when you pick up something new, you can change something that you got previously in certain abilities. Yeah. So that is the entirety of what this argument was this was a min-maxer argument that people went, look, now we can ban the spell because this is power creep and blah, blah, blah. Now, I do want to point out that Bill of Lost Souls actually did an article about Silvery Barbs. And it did bring up something interesting that I hadn't considered that does make me a little bit wary about Silvery Barbs, to the point where I think wholeheartedly it should be a 2nd level spell. And if it's ever used at any of my tables, I will make it a 2nd level spell, simply because I believe it's called Careful Spellcasting. There is a sorcerer meta magic option, and I'm actually going to look it up right now. Meta magic. It's not Careful. Yeah, so Heightened Spell. So, Heightened Spell is a meta magic option for sorcerers. And this is it. When you cast a spell that forces a creature to make a saving throw to resist its effects, you can spend 3 sorcery points to give one target of the spell disadvantage on its first saving throw made against the spell. So, people are bringing up the fact that Silvery Barb's a 1st level spell, effectively does the same thing, but you can use it after they roll their save. Whereas Heightened Spell, you have to use it when you cast the spell, so you don't know if you're going to need it or not. Whereas Silvery Barbs, you can use it afterwards. There are some slight differences. Silvery Barbs does not make them roll with disadvantage. It makes them roll 1d20 again, and if the result is lower on the d20 that they rolled, they have to take it. Otherwise, they have to keep the original one. It's not quite the same as disadvantage, but the actual effect of it is remarkably similar. And the outcome is generally going to be very, very similar, to the point where Silvery Barbs is actually a little bit better than Extended Spell, simply because Heightened Spell. Heightened Spell, you have to do it before you know whether or not it's going to be useful or not. Silvery Barbs, you have to wait for them to succeed, and then you can do it. In both cases, they can still succeed. You can succeed with disadvantage, and you can succeed on the second roll. So it's not a guaranteed thing, but Silvery Barbs also allows you to effectively give out a DM inspiration, which is different than a bardic inspiration. And I wish they would change the wording on those, simply because having two different effects with the same name is just bad design. But anyway, that argument makes perfect sense to me. And none of that was brought up in any of the stuff I saw online. It was all about, well, it breaks legendary resistance. Blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't. It never has. It never did. It just doesn't do that. And then the other thing was, well, it's a reaction spell, and reaction spells are too powerful. Blah, 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 blah. It's not. It's an interesting thing to do. But when you bring up the fact that Heightened Spell effectively does the same thing from a mechanical standpoint, despite the fact that there are some differences, from a mechanical standpoint, they're almost identical. But Heightened Spell costs 3 sorcery points, and sorcerers can translate spell slots into sorcery points and sorcery points into spell slots. And to create a first level spell slot, they only need 2 sorcery points. Now, it does take an additional action to create a spell slot and then use it. So at that point, it's even more expensive when you factor that in. But the fact of the matter is, Silvery Barbs, while it is a really interesting spell, is more powerful than Heightened Spell, which is a base player's handbook level sorcerer ability. And when you look at that, I would argue at this point, Silvery Barbs, because of how much it does, should be a 3rd level spell. Because at that point, Heightened Spell is still a better option for sorcerers. Because also, sorcerers get access to Silvery Barbs. It's on their spell list. So there is no reason a sorcerer would ever take Heightened Spell if they have access to Silvery Barbs. It is the right answer. And I've mentioned this before. When you give players a choice, but there's one obviously right answer and one wrong answer, one that's going to cost you more or do more things that make it difficult for you, that's not a choice. That is the illusion of choice, and it's bad game design. And that's kind of what I see Silvery Barbs here when that argument is brought up. And it's an extremely valid argument. When you look at it that way, I don't think there's a way to defend it being a 1st level spell. I don't. It is too powerful for a 1st level spell, and it gets rid of one of the sorcerer's abilities, an ability that a sorcerer can't get until 2nd level, or actually until 3rd level, because they don't get meta magic until 3rd level. So you are replacing a 3rd level sorcerer ability with a 1st level spell that a sorcerer can take, but so can bards and wizards. That would be enough for me, not to ban the spell, but to up it to a 3rd level spell. The same level as Counterspell. And the reason I say that is Counterspell is technically more powerful in certain instances because it gets rid of a spell entirely. However, Silvery Barbs Silvery Barbs lets you make sure that you don't waste it unless it's something that's going to be useful. You don't have to cast it when you cast the spell. You use it whenever. So there's a much wider range of aspects that you can use it in. It can be used in a positive or negative way. You can use it to make enemies reroll saving throws to hope that they miss. And I think I'm actually going to look up Silvery Barbs real quick here, because I thought it could also be used in a positive manner. Spells. Silvery Barbs. So you magic distract a triggering creature. Triggering creature must re-roll. Oh, it has to use the lower roll. Okay, so it can only be used in a negative way. I thought you could do it either way, but no, it can only be used in a negative way, which is still very, very useful, and it can be used anytime there's a saving throw. So it could be used on a spell effect. It could be used on Monk's Stunning Strike. It could be used on a fighter doing a push attack. There's so many different instances where that. So, and it gives out a DM inspiration, which effectively allows someone to roll advantage on something that they do in the next. I believe it's in the next minute. Has advantage on the next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes within 1 minute. So it is the very next thing that they do that requires a roll, but that's still really powerful. It's way too powerful for a first level spell. Second level spell I was okay with until I saw that it effectively removes Heightened Spell. And making it a second level spell would effectively make it cost the same as Heightened Spell, but be significantly more useful. So jumping it up to a third level spell slot makes it more expensive than Heightened Spell. So there is still a benefit to using Heightened Spell, and I think it makes sense for it to be on the same level as Counterspell. It has the same possibility of causing chaos. Counterspell itself is a chaotic spell. It really, really is. It can be a lot of fun, but it can be very chaotic. And this has that opportunity of being this the same thing, effectively. So... yeah. So I was right. I feel really good about myself. Again, I'm generally not one to gloat, but I needed the endorphin hit. I really did. Yesterday was so bad. And I will actively admit I actually went and I replied to the 3 different people. I actually blocked one person because I was just sick of hearing it. And the argument that they made was worse than the arguments that I'd heard thus far. Like it was just argumentative and pedantic, and I'm like, no, just I'm not even going to deal with you. I've already, if you'd actually read the thread, you'd already seen, hey, I've already asked Perkins and Crawford about this. I'm waiting on a ruling. Just leave me alone. And so if you're the one person that I blocked about this, sorry. Maybe don't antagonize someone on to Twitter with your bad take. But I went through and I replied to every other person and go, oh look, they said it doesn't affect legendary resistance. Looks like I was right. Do you believe me now? Or we done yet? And I specifically said in 2 of the replies, I said, oh, and look, they didn't change anything. There was no modification to the spell, so it was never that way. It's not like they changed something. Nope, it never worked that way. You were wrong from the beginning. We done now? It's a dick move. I understand that. But every so often, I consider it a righteous indignation. And every so often, like I said, yesterday was bad. Yesterday was really, really bad. Yes, let's put it this way. Without inciting any sort of a panic, yesterday was dangerous kind of bad. Like, the reason nothing bad happened is I have made plans for dangerous kind of bad. And by plans, I mean when I get to the point where I might do something that I can't undo, I have already gone through that scenario in my head and said, okay, If I get to a point like this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop doing things. I'm going to find something relaxing. That may be playing a video game. It may be just lying down and watching some TV. But I'm going to stop all obligations that I have. That's I'm done. I give up for the day and I go and take care of myself. That is an exceptionally important thing to do if you struggle with depression, because you will get to the point where you have one of those dangerous bad days where you're in such a low state and such a dehumanized state where you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I don't even deserve to exist anymore. There's nothing about me that is a positive impact on this world. The world would be a better place if I wasn't breaking it. If you struggle with depression, you will eventually get to that point. And if it comes upon you unexpectedly, it's really hard to argue with that logic when you're in that frame of mind. The scariest thing in the world is talking to someone who is, I'll say it so YouTube can get upset. The scariest thing in the world is talking to someone who is truly suicidal. And the reason that is someone that is truly suicidal makes sense. The decision that they're about to make, they have logically thought through the process really, really well. It's something that I think most movies and most depictions of suicide get absolutely wrong. When when you finally do make the decision, and I have made that decision, and I absolutely lucked out the first time I made that decision because I hadn't planned for it. And I got a call from my father, and he talked me down. And he had no idea. I never mentioned to him in the entire conversation, never mentioned I was suicidal, never mentioned. I had a knife in front of me. Literally, I had a knife on my desk in front of me, ready to do it. And I just had this very strong feeling that I couldn't do it yet. I wasn't allowed to do it yet. I was going to do it, but I had to wait for a little bit. Call it whatever you want. I am a religious person. I am a Christian. I firmly believe that was God going, you know what? No. Wait, I'm going to fix this. And I get a phone call out of the blue. I hadn't talked to my dad in, I don't know, like a couple weeks. We weren't on bad terms or anything at that point. We had been previously, but at that point we were fine. And he just randomly called me to see how I was doing. And we just talked. I think we might have talked about something on the Food Network, because that's what we tended to do at that point in our lives. We were real big into Dinner Impossible. Restaurant Impossible wasn't a thing yet. And Iron Chef. We used to, when I was in college, actually, this was a few years after that. When I was in college, actually, I used to watch Dinner Impossible in college, and on commercials, I would call my dad, and we would talk about the stuff that we saw, and like, oh, I wonder if he's going to do this. Like that's how we bonded. So I think that was probably what we talked about. And I never, my dad had no idea for years that he just talked me out of killing myself, because I didn't seem suicidal. I seemed very, very calm. I actually seemed a little bit happy, which is kind of what happens when people finally make the decision of, no, I'm going to end this, because for the first time in a long time, they feel like they have control. Depression makes you feel like you have no control over everything, over anything. And so a lot of people, when they finally make the decision, they look happier. And they are happier because they feel like they've gotten that little bit of control back in their little lives. And so my dad had no idea that I literally was seconds away from taking my own life. And we just talked. And I think the entire conversation lasted for 20 minutes. That was it. And it was that 20-minute boost of endorphins and that 20-minute acknowledgement that there was somebody somewhere in the world that would care if I was alive or not. It got me out of it. I was broken. The logic in my head was broken at that point, and it didn't make sense to kill myself anymore. So yeah, I can't remember how we got on the topic of that, but going back to the topic of I really needed that boost of endorphins. Now I will 100% acknowledge um, this is a maladaptive coping method. There's two types of coping when you're dealing with mental illnesses. There are healthy coping methods and there are maladaptive coping methods. Maladaptive coping methods are things that give you a short boost of endorphins, but if you use them long term, they will eventually just get things worse. And if I based the entirety of me feeling good or about picking arguments with people on the internet and being proven right, that's a bad recipe. It's the same thing that there are some people that deal with anxiety or depression or a bunch of different mental illnesses by things like promiscuity, just going out and having, because in case you're unaware, sex gives you endorphins. It's a real quick, easy endorphin hit. But that's a self-destructive behavior because just going around and having sex with anything that moves increases your chance of getting a lot of diseases and other things like that. And it's not a healthy way to deal with it. You're not dealing with the problem. So I'm not going to just go around picking fights on the internet, hoping that I'll be proven right. However, just in this one instance, it felt good to gloat. And Think DM or anyone else that I did this to, if you're really upset with me, I apologize. Like I said, I needed this. I needed the win. And unfortunately, I had to make you feel a little bit stupid to do that, and it was a dick move. But it's a really minor thing, and it's not something I'm going to make a habit of. And I needed the win, so yeah. Uh, I'm pleased. I was right. Silvery Barbs is still a mess. So I firmly believe now that third level is the right level for it, and that's the only thing I'd change. Because I still think it's an interesting spell. It's just too low a level. Um, yeah. So that's all for me today. I hope you guys watched my D&D deep dive yesterday because I actually had a lot of fun recording it. Um, Otherwise, yeah, that's all for me today. I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye bye.